Welcome back to the D1 Coaches Pod, where two coaches from two different sports have one empowering goal. I am Mahoreyana, Associate Head Coach for the TCU Beach Volleyball team, a former athlete and a mental health advocate.
I am Coach David Roditi. I'm the TCU Men's Tennis Coach. We give you a behind-the-scenes look into the lives of coaches, athletes, and the stories that shape us beyond the court. No better example than today. Today's podcast, I couldn't be more excited. Maho will introduce our special guest. He was my mentor. He still is my mentor. Any success that we've had at TCU Tennis is because of this man today. And he's got an incredible story of success, adversity, and you will all enjoy it. Stay tuned. I can't wait.
Yes. So today's guest is a legend in college tennis. With like 3 decades of coaching experience, he has coached 3 different programs at Kansas, men and women, at TCU and at the University of Texas, developing programs with some of the best players of the country. He has been nominated 10 times Coach of the Year, Conference Coach of the Year, and one time National Coach of the Year. It's very inspiring that he has led 4 different programs to top 10 finishes. So this is amazing. Like, it's not only about coaching tennis, not only about the skills. This is about developing a culture, developing like so many things. So I'm so excited to have Coach Michael Center here with us. Welcome to D1 Coaches Pod.
Well, it's an honor to be here today. It's I've listened to the first couple podcasts. I've enjoyed it, so I feel honored to be here to be able to be your guest.
Thank you.
Welcome, Coach Center. We go way back. We met when you were the coach at Kansas, and I was just a student. And since my coach was in his 70s at the time, and I was having girlfriend problems, I would come and ask you for advice. And she broke up with me soon after, so I don't think your advice really helped me much, but it did help my tennis. So I always remember that. You were one of the young coaches out there. Take us through your journey of how you got started, boy from Kansas, from Manhattan, Kansas. How'd you end up at the University of Texas where you coached for 20 years?
Well, I was a high school basketball player and tennis player. I was not a full-time, typical junior tennis player that was traveling all over the country. I was a decent athlete. I went to the University of Kansas, and the guy that took over the program arrived the same time I did, not the same person that recruited me, a guy named Scott Perelman, who's now one of your assistant coaches. So we met in the fall of 1982. I had no idea what to expect. And before I knew it, I was hopping up and down on the stairs at Allen Fieldhouse and running mile times and lifting and just working incredibly hard, but had an amazing college experience. Learned a lot, became a much better player, I think a much better person. Decided to go to graduate school. And I actually served first as an assistant coach for Coach Perelman. He coached the men and the women at the time, so I was the assistant coach for a year. And then I decided to go to graduate school. I wanted to be an athletic director. I wanted to be the commissioner of a conference. I wanted to be the leader of an organization. And so I got my master's in athletics administration and sports psychology, and was trying to get into a department. And I got a call in the middle of the night from Coach Perelman that they'd broken up the teams. They had a separate men's coach and women's coach, and the guy had just taken the job had left right before school started. He said, I need you to come back and be the women's tennis coach at the University of Kansas. And I said, are you serious? Really? You want me to be the women's tennis coach? And he said, yeah. And I thought about it. I said, well, this would be a great way to get involved in an athletic department. This would be a great entry in that helped me meet my goals of becoming an athletic director. So I took the job. I think I was making about $18,000 a year, and we had no budget. We had to raise a lot of money. We had no facilities, really. And I loved it. I loved it. I coached the women's tennis team for 3 years. Then he left and went to Tennessee. I became the men's tennis coach and the director of tennis. Still couldn't make enough money. I ended up leaving after 7 years, and I went to become a stockbroker for 2 years. I worked for a company called Payne Weber, which no longer exists, which was bought by UBS. But those 2 years, I actually was a volunteer at Stanford, and they had Bob and Mike Bryan were on the team, legendary doubles team. Paul Goldstein, who's the current Stanford coach, a guy named Ryan Walter. It was one of the all-time great teams in the history of, at least in the modern era, the last 40 to 45
they hardly
years.
lost. They hardly lost any matches.
They would skunk everyone. They won the team championship in 1998 and won the singles by playing against Bob Bryan, played against Paul Goldstein, and then Bob and Mike won the double. So it's about as dominant as a college team could be. So I really was not only mentored by Coach Perelman, but then I had the opportunity to be mentored by the great Dick Gould and John Whitlinger and watched how they ran their program. And then a friend of mine, a guy named Tim Cass, called me. This was really, the internet was just getting started. He said, Tut Bartson's going to retire at TCU. I think you should put your name in the mix. And I went to Kinko's and I updated my resume and put it in an envelope and stuck it in the mail. And no one called on my behalf or anything. And a few months later, I was interviewed and I was the new tennis coach at TCU in August of 1998. And so it was such an honor to come in after Coach Bartson, who was just such a legend in our sport. And I didn't know much about TCU. I thought maybe I'd live in Dallas because I'd been to Dallas. I had no idea that they were that far apart, that there was a little rivalry between TCU and Fort Worth. And I came in, and of course I knew you, David, as a player, but you were on the tour at the time, and you were in and out, staying with the Keenums, and you would help out. And we got to know each other even better at that point in time. And I had a great experience. And in fact, one of the most memorable experiences in matches was when we played SMU in the finals of the conference. And I think we had to win 3 or 4 tiebreakers all at once to keep the match extended, and we did, and we ended up winning the match. And I think we still have that picture of you jumping up and jumping in my arms, and
that was fun.
Yeah.
that was a lot of fun.
It started outdoors and then it moved indoors.
Right.
And Peter Coca-Cola came through big time.
Big time. Angie Larkin, who's still the women's golf coach here at TCU. Her daughter was just a little girl, and at about 5 all in the third, she screeched something out, and I think the SMU kid missed the shot, and we ended up winning 7-5 in the third.
Perfectly timed.
Perfectly timed yell by a 5-year-old, and it was just such a great experience, and I love my time here, and I met my wife here, who was the marketing director at TCU at the time, and then I got a call from Texas to come down and interview for the job at Texas.
Let me stop you there for a second, just for people to know that, they don't know both of you. So he was your assistant here for a little bit.
No, he was when I took the job at Texas, he came, he was just coming off the tour.
I was still on the tour.
Well, he was still on the tour. He was having some injury problems. We talked. I remember at my house here in Fort Worth, and we talked that day, and he decided to retire from the tour and be the assistant at Texas, and that was the fall of 2000. Okay. So that was a big get for me. That was my first recruit at Texas was Coach Roditi.
That was my first job, my first paying job. I still remember the interview. Yeah, sitting there in your living room, right by Westcliff.
Exactly.
Yeah, I remember you asked me 2 questions. So then you leave TCU program in great shape. That team that you put together got to the Final Four the year after under Joey Rive. And you take the Texas job, and you're there for 20 years. Tell us about your time at Texas, many people's dream job. You were starting to see at that time, this is 2000, you're in your 30s, and this is right when athletics was starting to become more of a business. And tell us about that whole time at Texas and that transition.
Well, there definitely was a shift. If you recall, in 1996, the Southwest Conference blew up. and you started to see conferences start to realign, searching for more money, more media money, more television revenue. Licensing agreements started to become, when I was a student at the University of Kansas, for example, you would never have seen an ad for Coke or Pepsi or anything in Allen Fieldhouse. That would have been taboo. Obviously, today you walk in and you're going to see advertisements everywhere. So money was starting to become a bigger thing. TCU got left behind in the conference reshuffling after 1996. Texas is now in the Big 12, no longer in the Southwest Conference, and we're starting the program at the time, but the dominant programs were still Stanford, UCLA, Georgia, and USC. I think up until that point, the team competitions that started in 1977, which was the format of a team playing, not just a point total of a tournament, but actually a head-to-head competition, had been dominated by those four schools. No one had won the competition outside of those four schools. So Texas had been a very good team, but no one had been able to crack that group. And so I'd had the opportunity to replace Coach Bartson, who was a legend. Well, now I'm walking in behind another legendary figure, a guy named Dave Snyder. And Dave Snyder and I knew each other because his niece had played on the team with me at Kansas. He was from Kansas, I was from Kansas, so we'd always had a little relationship, but we started to develop a nice relationship as well. He was just a wonderful man and another great mentor to me. So Coach Roditi was there with me. Our team was probably not at its best at that point, but I did not want to go in and just – it wasn't my personality to blow everything up. I'm like, we'll work our way through it. We'll help these guys. We need to recruit some additional players for sure, but we're gonna do the best we can. And it was a challenge. The first 3 or 4 years were a little bit of a challenge. We weren't at the level that I had hoped right away. I didn't get my instant satisfaction. I knew it was going to be a little bit of a process. But then we graduated everyone. Those guys have gone on and done very well. One became an engineer. One's an architect. Those guys really, they all got their degrees from Texas, and they're doing well in life. Good. And then by 05, 06 was when we then cracked into that upper group. We got to the Final Four in 2006, played for a national championship in 08, went back to the Final Four. So we started to get it going a little bit more, but it took some time.
Yeah. So let me stop there for a second. So you're talking about, you take over a program, right? And what I hear, and by knowing you in the past months that you've been here in Fort Worth, is like, I see you like as a program developer, right? You're developing a program, not only a team, but you're just like forming a program. You're developing humans, people, not only tennis players. How did you do that? Because it's not easy to transform a team like that.
Well, I tried to always think long term. Mm-hmm. I think one of the mistakes that people make, whether it's business or sports, is they want instant gratification. They want things right now. And David and I were there, and we knew there would be some growing pains along the way. But I really felt, and I would say the most important thing to me was that if someone came into our program, we would help develop their tennis game, of course, but we would help develop them as people. And when they left the University of Texas or TCU or Kansas, that they would be best prepared to go out onto the world, because no greater gift can a parent have as a parent now of a 23, soon to be 23 and 21-year-old. I want my boys to feel like they can go out on their own and make it on their own. And I didn't want to be a helicopter parent. I didn't want to be a helicopter coach. I wanted to empower these people, these kids, these young people, that by the time those 4 years were over, they were more equipped. They were better to handle difficult situations. They weren't going to get everything that they wanted. They learned how to be accountable. They learned how to work hard and be resilient, because that's what they're going to face when they go out into the world. And sometimes college athletics can become very transactional. How many did you win today? I mean, it's like Mac Brown, who was the football coach at Texas at the time. I was at a basketball game. He came up, tapped me on the shoulder. He said, Michael, I just want to give you some advice. He said, they know how to count here at Texas, meaning they're going to know exactly how many you win and how many you lose. And you can get that in your mind, and particularly at a school like Texas where you feel like the eyes of Texas are upon you because it's just such a big institution and a lot of people are watching what you're doing. You can overreact and you can become impulsive and make quick decisions or lose your temper. And I try to remind myself to have patience. And the guy that came in behind David was a guy named Ricardo Rubio, who is one of David's teammates. And he would always say to me, Coach, remember, these guys are young. They're going to make mistakes. And I try to remind myself of that. They're going to make mistakes, but just stay with it, stay with it, stay with it. And I would always evaluate at the end, did we get the most out of everyone? Did they become the best players and best people, and better people that year? And hopefully the answer would be yes. And that was my goal.
Yeah, I remember listening to you talk right now. No better example. Tell us the story about Manny Ortiz at University of Kansas. Tell us. I love that story, and there's not a better example of what you're talking about right now.
Well, Manny Ortiz I think he's your age.
Yes.
Yeah, you guys are the exact same age. So when I took the job at the University of Kansas after Coach Perlman had left, he was a sophomore in the fall of '92, and Manny had a temper. Manny was very emotional.
Puerto Rican.
Twin, high energy, very combative with just about everyone, whether it's his teammates, the coaches, the officials, his professors. It didn't matter. Manny was going to find something to fight you over. And so he was struggling. He wasn't doing very well in school. He wasn't doing well in his tennis. He wasn't in very good shape. And I called him in, and I read a letter to him that I'd written. I said, Dear Mr. Ortiz, Tony, his father, I said, I regret to inform you that Manny's scholarship will not be renewed next year. He's been disrespectful to the coaches. He's been disrespectful to his teammates. He's been disrespectful to the officials. He's not upholding his end of the bargain in the classroom. His GPA is borderline failing out. And I read in this letter, and you could tell it was really impacting Manny. He was almost tearing up. And I folded it up. This was before email, and I put it in an envelope. I already had a stamp on it, and I licked it, and I put it on my desk, and it was addressed to his father. And I said, one more time, one more incident, one more screw-up, this is going in the mail.
Okay, so you didn't send it.
I did not send it. I just put it on my desk. I said, one more time, and I'm going to put this in the mail. Well, the neat thing about Manny was, this was towards the end of the year. He came back. He lost, I think, 15 or 20 pounds. He played fantastic. His GPA went from a 2.2 to a 3.8. He got into law school at Kansas, and he's now one of the most successful lobbyists in Washington, D.C., making 7 figures plus and having an incredible life.
What?
And I love that story.
And those you always want to think back and remember those. Sometimes it always doesn't work out that well.
Yeah.
But that was what I was trying to do, and that was just an example that it did work out. And he stayed in school, and he went to law school, and so yeah, he's had a tremendous life at this point, and with a beautiful family.
Man, love it.
Because I knew that story, that's actually what we did with Cameron Norrie. I don't even know if you know this, but instead of a letter, it was an email. I think it's still on my computer. It's still in my outbox. I probably should delete it. But we did the same with Cameron. And obviously, you know what Cameron's turned out to be, you know, top 10 in the world, and he was our stud. He wasn't to that point. It was more about, hey, you want to be a professional tennis player? You're not living like somebody. You're not making decisions like somebody who's going to be a professional tennis player.
Right.
So we wrote that email, put it in the outbox, said one more, we're pushing send. I couldn't be more nervous because the last thing we wanted to do was lose Cameron.
Yeah.
At the same time, we were willing to lose him because we knew that was the best. And the rest is history. He's done unbelievably well. He changed his ways. And now he's a role model, professional athlete. So, and that was, I learned that from you. Same strategy, but more updated with an email.
With an email.
So at Texas, you're there for 20 years, finals of NCAA, several Final Fours. A lot of players came in, came out. Looking back, we always talk about the difference between being good and being great. If you had to describe or use examples of the difference between a good team and a great team, what made it, for those parents out there, for those future D1 athletes, or obviously any level athlete, what was the difference, if you can think back, between good and then those great teams that you had?
I think the one thing that would stand out to me is we had a lot of good teams, and we had some great teams. They weren't all great teams, but the good teams, I felt like I was always encouraged, always having to coach them, push them, challenge them. The great teams started to do it themselves. The great teams started to take the accountability, and I would hear them. I remember we were getting ready to play in the national championship in 2008 against Georgia, and as the tournament had started, I overheard one of the players say, "We're going to get this." I mean, from the very beginning of the tournament, we're winning this thing. And they had kind of taken over the team. I was the coach, but they had taken over the team. And when you can find players who can push themselves, and I used to always tell the players, if you want to be great, it will be determined on what you do when I'm not watching. 100%. You can come to the practice and come to the individual workout and do the fitness and the weights and watch the film, but it's the little things that you'll do when I'm not telling you to do it all the time. And that's what a great team would start to do. They would do the little things without the coaches always having to say, "Hey, do this, hey, do that, hey, do this." And one of the players right now I think he's about 15 right now in the world in doubles, is Kid Lloyd Glasspool. Every time I'd go down to the weight room to meet with the strength coach or work out myself, I kept running into him. I wasn't telling him, "Hey, you need to go get stronger." Yeah. He knew he wanted to be a pro, and he knew he needed to get stronger. And now he's a big, strong guy on the tour with one of the best serves in the world, at least on the doubles tour. That's so awesome. That would be the one thing that I think stood out with the great teams, is they started to take it on themselves, and that I felt like by the end of the season they were running the show.
Was there a leader in that locker room, in that team, that 2008? Was there a guy that was sort of took over, or was it a bunch of guys?
I think it was a bunch of guys.
Okay.
I really do. I don't think it was just one guy. I think they all bought in, and they all thought they were pretty good, and they all wanted to to do it. And some of those guys on that team had come from not even playing in the lineup to being almost undefeated during the season at their spots. Mm-hmm. So it was a pretty neat rise to watch a guy like Luis Diaz-Barriga, who was almost off the team.
Yes, I remember that.
And could not beat anyone, to winning 42 of his last 45 matches in college. And what he learned, and he was just relentless by the end. And I didn't need to tell him to go work on his serve extra. Yeah. He knew it.
Well, that's great, because what I'm hearing is that you say like team accountability, not you as a coach or us as coaches. We deal with this every day, right? And we want them to be leaders, and we want them to hold each other accountable. But then the difference that I'm hearing from you is that they went from doing, like telling them what to do, to being. This is who they are. This is the team that they show up, they do their things, they just are responsible, they just are accountable. Correct?
Yeah, and they push each other. So at practice, you would see that type of team. Hey, let's stay and play a little bit more. Or they would get there a little bit early and play these little bounce games or whatever. There was just always around the courts. They always wanted to hit. And the practices were super competitive. I remember that team, we had a fall tournament, and we had Reyes Varela and Diaz. They were both, Mickey's still on the tour, and Ed Corey and Kellen D'Amico. and they're playing each other in the finals of this tournament. And you would have thought it was the final of Wimbledon. There was no one else there. I think all the teams had gone home. It might have rained. We just were playing it like the next day, and they were playing like their lives depended on it. And I knew at that point that this team was going to be good.
So take us to 2019. You've been there for 20 years. You're now a public speaker. Tell us about what happened between being the head coach at Texas and now you are a public speaker talking about leadership. Tell us about that.
Well, it's there are a few days that are etched in my brain that will stay there for the rest of my lives. And one is March 12th, almost 6 years ago, 2019. I was getting up that morning. We had a match against Rice. We were ranked 2 in the country at the time, and Ohio State was coming to play us on Thursday, and they were number 1. And that was our only loss at that point of the season. So I was really focused on Ohio State and what we were going to do that night against Rice to get ready for Ohio State. And I'd gotten a text message from my friend who was a coach at USC. I was writing this message back to him, and I hear this bashing on my door. Like I thought there was an accident outside. I thought someone had been hurt. I'm in my underwear. It's early in the morning, and I rush to the door, and this group of FBI agents come crashing through my door and shackle me at my ankles and my wrists. And I have no idea what's going on. And my wife comes running down the hall. My oldest son comes running down the hall. He's yelling. No idea what's going on, and I'm arrested. And that was the end of my career. You know, that it was like a train wreck for me that day. All those years, this team that we had not had a facility for 4 or 5 years at that point, and we just kind of worked through it, and I felt like we had the program where we really wanted it to be, and my life was in a great spot with my kids and my family, and I'm taken to prison, and all of a sudden I realized I'm a part of this national story, Varsity Blues. And I didn't, the whole thing happened because one time a guy called me and said, "Hey, would you help get this kid into school?" And at the time, they had torn our tennis center down. And DeLoss Dodds, who was the athletic director, said, "You have $15 million to rebuild the tennis center." Well, he left during this whole Mac Brown departure and DeLoss. There was a major shakeup. And so when this guy, Steve Patterson, and really Chris Plonsky started running our department. And they came to me and a group and said, that $15 million is no more. Either you raise $10 million or you won't get tennis courts. So I'm the coach at the University of Texas with the idea that we're not going to have tennis courts. And they tore the tennis center down. They built anybody who's been in Austin, you see that big medical school down by the campus. That's where the tennis courts used to be. And so I get a call, and the guy says, so I take this person's name and I say, this young man will not play tennis. He has to sign what's called a national letter of intent. He signs the national letter of intent. Our athletic director signs off on it. Compliance signs off on it. Everyone signs off on it. No one says anything. And, of course, it's to help him be the manager of the basketball team. His father's going to help us raise money, blah, blah, blah. And everything goes, 5 years later, 4.5 years later, this comes to fruition. I made some mistakes. I own my mistakes, but I did not, and I'll say this today probably publicly for the first time, I did not do the things that they said I did that put me in jail. I did not defraud the University of Texas. They knew who this kid was. They admitted him. They signed off on him. They hired him. I sent him down to the compliance office. So I never understood what that meant, but I'll never forget when I sat with the FBI agent and I told him that side of the story. He says, "You're lying." And I said, "Well, I'm not lying. Here's text messages. All you have to do is look at the letter of intent." He said, "What's a letter of intent?" I'll never forget that. I said, "Well, that's the most important piece of this whole story is there's a document that has everyone's signature on it. It has a lot of vetting that goes along with it." And he looked at me, he says, "I don't care what your side of the story is. Either you agree with what I said happened or you're going to prison for a long time." And I said, "Guilty," the next day. And my life changed forever. And the people that fought it, the families that fought it, the coach that fought it, it took them 4 or 5 years and millions of dollars to fight it, but they were exonerated because this honest services fraud or whatever charge that they were throwing over everyone basically is a charge that, from what I can read, is just a kind of a made-up charge that the Supreme Court says doesn't really carry much validity to it. But at the time, I was so afraid. I didn't have millions of dollars to spend. I was not going to fight it. But carrying this felony has been devastating because I was never able to coach again. It was very difficult for me to work again. I was perceived very differently. But I'm still the same person. I still wanted to help people. And yet I still battle and face criticisms. Even last week, I had to deal with something where my picture ended up on the internet somewhere over something that I had nothing to do with. Even a state congresswoman, like something with school vouchers, and they put my picture. It was just the craziest things that you could ever imagine.
Yeah.
And all I'm trying to do is be a coach and help people and develop people. And I made a mistake by getting involved, but the school wanted me to raise $10 to $15 million. It was not an easy task because I had just helped raise $8 million to build an indoor facility, and we were tapped out. I just didn't really feel like I had anywhere else to turn, and I should have never gotten involved with that, but I did. But I really thought when I walked out that first day, I said, well, at least I know one thing. The University of Texas will stand behind me because they know there's a letter of intent. Yeah. They know there's a paper trail. They're my family. Uh-huh. I've raised my horns for the last 20 years and sung the Eyes of Texas, and all my kids have graduated from school, and we've won a lot of tennis matches, and we've raised money. They'll stand behind me. That didn't happen. And so that hurt. That hurt a lot. That was very painful for me, very painful on my family, my children. But 6 years later, I'm here with you guys. I'm working at TCU and helping with the academy, and I'm loving it, and I'm speaking, and I have a story that I feel like can help people and educate people and motivate people, and so I'm looking forward to this next chapter. It's taken me a little while to get there, I'll be honest, but I feel like I'm in a much better place than I was even 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, we're lucky to have you. Yeah. We're the winners here. That you're here in Fort Worth. You're involved with our program now, helping me on a daily basis. Let's not forget that team, when you were arrested in March 12th, I remember exactly where I was. We were playing Tennessee that morning, and I was in the middle of the match getting texts from people, and I was like, oh, they got the wrong guy. I know this guy, and they got the wrong guy. And as you know, you didn't even know what you did wrong at the time. It was just came out of nowhere. That team won the NCAAs that year, which is a whole another, maybe irrelevant in a way, but relevant, an amazing story. I think one day this will be a movie. I truly believe that. And you end up in prison. You go for 6 months. And a lot of what you speak about is your experience, what you went through before going to jail, before going to prison, in prison, after. What got you through that? How'd you make it through something like that? You're not I know you very well. I've always said you're a Boy Scout. You're actually a little too good, and that's probably why you got caught up in all that. You didn't see it coming. But how'd you get through that?
Yeah.
Well, it was tough. I would say that it was not. I didn't handle it perfectly. I was pretty depressed. They basically took me for a year and just kick you to the curb, where you have to wait for a year to be sentenced. And I kept waiting. They kept delaying. They could call you if I thought I was supposed to go in front of the judge on March 1st, for example, just throwing out a date. They could call you on February 27th and say, you know what, we're changing the date. And that happened to me a couple of times. So I'm waiting and I'm waiting and I'm waiting. I'm teaching some tennis, but I'm getting very depressed, to be honest with you. And I went finally in February of 2020, almost a year later, they sentenced me to go to prison on April 6th of 2020. Well, if you think back, what happened in March of 2020?
Yeah, that's COVID.
13th.
COVID hits. And I had to call this place. No one would answer the phone. I called 7 to 10 times. Finally, I said, well, I'm reporting this day. What do I need to do? No one told me anything. The federal government tells you nothing. You can bring a pair of glasses. I said, can I bring any like nasal spray? Nothing. And you're going to have to be in a basically solitary confinement for 14 days. I said, I'm claustrophobic. I don't know. 14 days. I don't know if I can do it. If you don't show up, we'll send the marshal out to you. Screw you. You'll be arrested. I don't care, and hangs up.
Wow.
So I show up there. I meet with this psychologist. He asked me some of the strangest questions I've ever been asked in my life. And he said, did you ever think about committing suicide? I said, well, I got to be honest. I'll be honest. I'm going to tell the truth. I said, it entered my mind. I just didn't know if I could handle this. I never imagined going to prison or being in trouble. I don't even know I think I had one speeding ticket in my life at that point. I was like a rules follower.
You're a Boy Scout.
I was a rules follower. I still am, but I was a rules follower, and I didn't know what to say. And he says, "Well, I'm putting you in what do they call it? They called it suicide prevention watch."
Oh.
So they take me into this cell, and they turn the lights on, and for 48 hours, they take all your clothes off and put you in a room that has a concrete bed with metal latches attached to the side. And the AC is broken, and it's about 90 degrees in there, and I'm sweating, and I can't breathe because the door is shut, and this is a door that's a steel door. The only way you get any food is that little latch, like you see in the movies, where they slide something in. Finally, in the middle of the night, I knocked on the door, and I said, please open up this latch. I can't breathe. I'm really struggling to breathe. I was in a dead sweat. They opened it up for a minute. Someone saw it on a camera, came running down, shut the door. At that point, I was at my all-time low, and I looked and I said to myself, what would I say to my team right now?
Wow. Yeah.
I preached all these things that we talked about being accountable and resilient and fighting and getting up. I said, I've got to get up, and I've got to hang in there, and I've got to do it. I've got to do it. So I made it through those 48 hours. They put me in this other room for 12 more days where I came out twice to take a shower, scared to death, claustrophobic, and I went to prison. And then I got COVID.
Oh, wow.
And I got really sick. And I remember asking them, hey, can I get some antihistamine, or can I get a ibuprofen? And they're like, I don't want to tell you what they tell you, but basically, screw you. You're not getting anything. I don't care. Right. Basically, I felt like if you were about to die, they would move you to the hospital because they didn't want you to die there. But if I had died there, it'd been like, well, okay, he died. That's just the way it is. And the food, they would throw like a molded bologna sandwich through the door because no one wanted to come in because everyone had COVID. I was in a room with 45 other guys with COVID.
Wow.
Coughing and wheezing, and one guy was probably 400 pounds. He could barely breathe. And so those experiences really impacted me as who I am. And it made me understand the value of patience. And I will tell anybody this, if you're an athlete or a coach, you have to have patience. Because when you're there and you're in that situation, you have no control. If I wanted to call David or if I wanted to call my wife and talk about something, I couldn't do it. They would shut us down where you had no cell phone. When everyone got COVID, no one obviously had a cell phone, but you could not email and you could not use the phone for 45 days.
Wow. And you're
cut off from the world.
Yeah, I remember even trying to send you something. It was not easy. It was complicated. There was a process and the type of letter that you had to send it. It had to be a specific color, paper, and a specific size. And I was terrible. I feel terrible about it. I was never there. I think I sent a book one time, and I know you read a lot, and you played golf in your mind.
I would play golf in my mind. I read probably 50 books. I read Nelson Mandela's story. It was like 800 pages in 2 days. Yeah. I did everything I could to keep my mind active, but I learned that I had to have patience because I had no control over my day. Someone would check me 9 times a day. The guards would kind of, for me, I was one of the few white people there, and they liked to pick on me. You know, they wanted to make sure they thought I was privileged, and they wanted to kind of keep me down. And one time I thought I was going to get out because of the COVID policies that had passed, and this guy came up to me, he goes, he starts laughing, said, "Hey, I heard your name in a meeting today. You're not going anywhere. You're staying right here." That knocked me down hard that day. 100%. So I had all these things that hit me. So that's why I do this speaking now, because not only do I take and work with so many great coaches and have so many great experiences, but I feel like I've been through something that's a little different than most people go through, and I wish I didn't have this experience. But I feel like when I do speak to people, it resonates with them at some point about their life, because no one goes through life unscathed. I'm 100%. Sorry. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. And if it hasn't happened to you yet, something will happen. And people get sick, or something happens with their parents, or you have challenges with your children, or you lose your job, or something goes. You don't go through life with a free pass. Yeah. And I haven't gone through life with a free pass. And so I want to take all these experiences as a coach, as a leader, as what I went through with prison and now after prison, and try to help people. And that's my goal.
Yeah. No, it's just, wow. It's the story. It's just unbelievable. At the same time, like, I hear like you were able to cope just being strong, right? Patience, hope, but at the same time, like, that hope was taken away daily. That's what I hear, right? And then, but now you come back, right, with all this experience, all this knowledge, that not only you have it, but I can sense that you're eager to share with people so they can become better, so they can fight, be resilient. And you work now at the academy, so you have with little kids, but also I think you've been a huge part in David's life too as a mentor, and that involves me too. So I am just grateful for the man you became, and you know what you are giving us every day, because I'm not with you every day, but you're with David a lot. But just
she gets jealous.
I get jealous. Yes, I do.
She doesn't like when I talk to you more than I do.
I do like. I'm okay. Sometimes, you know, David has a lot going on, and
yes,
and now does. You're here, and he wants to spend a lot of time with you as well, which I like you too. and I like to spend time with you. But yeah, you're taking me out of.
So I want to talk a little bit about your family. You have 2 boys. They're doing great. One of them is about to graduate from University of Wisconsin, my godson, my Jewish godson.
Yes.
And Ben at Colorado, he's got a year and a half to go. How was that like at home? You know, if you have 2 boys that are in high school, that's a very critical age. How'd you handle that?
Well, when I came home after everything happened on March 12th, we got together. Obviously, everyone was pretty shaken, and I just said to everyone, I will make a promise to you. Nothing in your lives will change. You're going to go to school, or you're going to go to the schools where you want to go to college, wherever you want to go, and you're going to live your life and go for your dreams. And I'm still here. I'm going to support that, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to make that happen. And I feel good. 6 years later, they're both at great schools. David's going to graduate. He's doing great. My youngest son, Ben, is an engineering major, and he's got a great internship this summer, and he's doing fantastic. And my wife still works at this St. Stephen's, where you worked with her for a little while, and we're in the same house. And you know, it hasn't been perfect, but I feel like the family is doing well.
Yeah, it's unbelievable to go something like, you know, through what you had to go through. Very few people would, 6 years later, your life, other than your job, everything is probably exactly the same as it would have been had you not gone through that. And do you talk to your boys about it? Do they ever bring it up?
We don't talk about it. My son, my oldest one, is a little more verbal.
Yes.
My youngest one is holds things in a little bit more.
Well, he's an engineer.
He's an engineer. You know David, you're his godfather, and he just says, Dad, you're the man. I love you, and you got screwed, and we're just going to keep going forward. And I'm like, okay,
That's awesome.
let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go. You just keep doing your thing. And I told him the other day, and I talked to him last night, I said, just keep going for your dreams. Just keep reaching and going and doing what you want to do. And he's making these little short films. He's going to graduate. He wants to move to New York. All these things. So I'm very happy for him and really proud of him.
What would you say? We'll wrap up here, but we have lots of parents, student athletes listening. What would you say to a 15, 16-year-old student athlete that wants to play high-level sports, or their parents? As a coach, you've been a coach for 30 years. You've seen so many successful players come through the experience that you went through. What would be your advice to those parents and those kids listening?
My advice is don't get caught up in the short term. Surround yourself with people that are going to help you grow and develop. And if you keep surrounding yourself with the right people and you keep trying to improve each day, good things will happen. There's no final outcome that you can reach for and say, I want it to be this way. Because when you start creating all these expectations on how things are supposed to be, you're just going to get disappointed. So put yourself in a position where you can keep growing, you keep developing, you're around people who are encouraging. Be around people that care about you, that truly care about you. And I think that's what separates Coach Roditi here. He cares about people. People like him. Gets a little worked up sometimes. We talk about it.
I learned that from you too.
Yeah, but you really
Getting worked up?
Yep.
Yeah, I could get worked up sometimes, but you really care about people, and people like him.
Yeah.
People are attracted to him. He's kind of a magnet.
Like me, I'm attracted
You're
to him.
attracted to him. He's a person, and I think that's a great way to go through life, is feeling like you're there to help people and help develop people. And if I could encourage any parents or kids, put themselves in those, get away from just the transaction of how much you can get today. Think about what's going to help you grow down the road.
Which is harder every day, correct?
Which is becoming more and more
today's
challenging.
environment, especially in the whole college. You got to be looking at what's going on in college athletics, and you probably, part of you wants to throw up.
That's a whole nother podcast.
Correct. Everything's transactional today, transfer portal, all this stuff.
Yeah, it's tough.
Well, I know we got to wrap up, but I want to publicly thank you. I've learned a lot from you. I learned the good and the bad. I purposely mention our associate head coach now, assistant coach Devin Bowen, and Coach P's name in every opportunity since when you were my boss and you were the head coach at our first banquet. You forgot to mention my name, and I had never worked so hard in my life, and you went through this whole hour banquet, and I know I've never let you forget. So I learned the good and the bad.
Yeah.
How to grow. One of the things that everything you've talked about, it's very ingrained in my brain, and how to build a program, not just a good team, but how to build a program that is so in my head. And we do the best that we can. Devin, Scott, your mentor, and myself every day working towards building a program. And Majo sees it every day, and she's doing the same of what she can control on the women's beach volleyball team. So thank you for being out here. Thank you for sharing that. I know it's not easy, and the reason you're doing all this is because you want to help people.
I still, and first of all, you have built a great program, and you've done a fantastic job. I just want you to know that. I'm really proud of you.
Thank you.
But I do feel like when I speak now and I can help someone, it somewhat replaces my coaching void that I have a little bit.
100%.
I feel it like when I speak to an audience and they look at me and they ask me questions. It's a funny line, and I know we probably need to go, but Coach Snyder, who I replaced at Texas, he says, the hardest thing that you give up when you stop coaching is people stop listening to you. He says, when I was the coach, I'd say, hey, everybody come over here. We're going to, at the end of practice, he says, no one comes over to you anymore. No one listens to anything you have to say anymore. And you don't have that opportunity. And I guess I kind of miss that, I'll be honest. But to be able to speak and feel like it impacts someone or help some person. And I spoke at this Texas High School Coaches Association not long ago because of you helping me get that opportunity. 700 people. And you called me that day and connected me and got me in the door that day. And I had such a fabulous time. And I had this woman come up to me from West Texas say, I'm not really a tennis coach, but I'm coaching the team. But I have this daughter, and I'm a single mother. And I just want you to know how much that speech meant to me.
That's
and
awesome.
that was like worth its weight in gold to me.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm trying to do.
Good.
And you're speaking to, sorry, Majo, you've spoken to insurance companies, coaches associations, and this is what you do. So if people will put the information down below.
Okay.
People can get a hold of you if they believe that they can help you. I would highly encourage everyone to have you speak to their team, to their company, to their employees. It's an unbelievable message. I always thought you lacked a little bit of street cred. You were a little too much of this little, Boy Scout Jewish boy that grew up with a silver spoon. But now that you've been to prison, you got that. You got that street cred. It allows you. So I know my sense of humor.
I wish I didn't have that street cred. The best line that you had was the day that I came home, David drove to Austin, and we played golf.
36 holes.
36
Awesome.
holes.
That
And
was awesome.
First time we played golf. And then we were playing a little bit later with our friend Joey Reve. And I think I beat him that day. And I obviously had not played much golf. And you looked at him and said, and look where he's been and look where you've been. And you're losing to this guy. And so he likes to kid me. But it making it lighthearted or joking about it sometimes makes it a little bit easier. It's still a little embarrassing for me, I'll be honest with you, but I'm getting better and better at it. But I do feel like this message can help people, and that has given me a lot of hope and excitement about what I can do in these this next chapter of my life.
Yeah, you played unbelievable that day. You've been 2 years without grabbing a club, and all, we can talk about visualization and playing your mind. And I thought maybe the way you started with 5 pars. I remember perfectly. And I thought maybe you had like El Chapo suite with your own golf simulator in that prison, the way you were playing.
It did not have a simulator.
I remember you missing the last putt. You missed the last putt for all the all the whatever,
yeah.
all the prices out there that we were playing for, and you almost killed me when I said, "Oh, I guess that putt was breaking the other way when you visualized it."
He likes to needle you, if you haven't noticed.
Oh,
Well,
Yeah.
all the time.
Majo,
But-
any final comments here?
Yeah, no. Before you jumped in, I was going to ask you how people can reach out to you, because I think what you're doing is amazing, right? But Gabby's going to put it down on the description so people
Okay.
can find you.
All right.
And yeah, maybe you can come and speak to our teams too. I think
Be
that would
happy
be
to.
amazing.
Anytime.
It would be
Yeah.
amazing.
Well,
It
thank
would
you.
be.
Thank you for having me. And hopefully this can help someone in some way, whether personal life or they've got their child getting ready to go to school, or a parent, that's trying to navigate through this whole process. There's a lot of stuff that goes on, but thanks for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you,
Been great.
Coach.
Thank you, Coach.
For
Thank
many,
you.
many reasons. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you.
Yes.
So with that, from the court,
To the sand. This is D1 Coaches Pod. See you in the next set. If you like this episode, please like, subscribe, and share. Go Frogs.
go Frogs.